I'm dressed up, so today must be a new choreography day. I should explain what choreographing is, because some people have asked. Choreographing is creating the dance. In some ways, some would consider it running before you can walk. So I started really seriously dancing after quarantining in 2020 upon my return from Turkey. That's been almost a year now, and part of the reason why I, as a hardcore adventure traveler, have been able to entertain myself for the rest of 2020 without adventure travel is through dancing. Dancing and choreographing work together, but they're very different functions in my opinion. Of course, to choreograph well, you have to dance well. I did something different than what most people would do. Instead of learning to dance well first, I actually did both in parallel. I'm learning to dance, and I'm also choreographing at the same time. This probably shows in my choreographies. One benefit to doing this, though, is that I can actually at least somewhat execute my own dances. I'm sure that if I invested the time to learn other people's choreography, I could also execute their choreography with some time and practice. But the creative spirit in me just likes the creativity of choreographing. Dancing, when you're learning other people's choreography, is just like rote memory. Of course, it builds your dance fundamentals, but choreographing, I think, accesses a whole other part of your brain. In some ways, it's like the difference between science and engineering. You need to understand science in order to engineer. So you need to understand dance in order to choreograph. But in my opinion, like engineering, choreographing is the more creative endeavor, because it's where you take the constraints of the world and work within them to create something new and unique. This week's choreography, unlike some previous weeks, I've actually worked on it all the way up till right now. I actually only finalized it a minute ago before I pressed record. Sometimes that happens because I have what I call substitute moves. So in order to help me practice to the beat and to the music, sometimes what I'll do is I will insert a substitute move that I'm intending to make better as time progresses. But sometimes those substitute moves actually stay in till the very end because I'm having trouble thinking of what to substitute it with. When we're talking about substituting a move, I think it has to be better than what I've sort of vomited out in the moment as a placeholder. Sometimes I never actually come up with something better. And again, as part of the constraint of this world, I've imposed on myself a scheduling deadline. Every 2 weeks, I choreograph a new routine, alternating between breakdancing and pop. Sometimes I'll actually add some breaking into the pop. With pop, I have many more options. I've mixed and matched many different styles of hip-hop. I think my love for right angles and tutting has become abundantly clear in my choreographies. So tutting will feature a lot in this new choreography. I've also added elements of whacking, botting, animation. This week, a new dance hip-hop style that I've added is threading. Breaking actually also uses threading, so I'm practicing both disciplines at once. I think this week was actually a lot of fun to learn the new style of dance. The very ambitious, excited, creative spirit in me wanted to immediately insert threading, even though I only really learned it about a week ago. So roughly what I've done is I've moved to a 2-week cycle for choreographing pop routines because they just take longer. The first week I spent actually choreographing the routine, so I'm creating the moves in the specific sequence that they go to the song. Then I spend the next week practicing the choreography. That's worked well for the last couple of choreographies. Before, what I did was I tried to compact all of that 2-week sequence into a week. But now I'm actually trying for more intricate, difficult choreographies as I've learned more and more dance moves. So that's what I'm doing right now. It's also been a lot of fun. And again, when I'm talking about dance or when I'm dancing, I think it's abundantly clear how happy I am doing all this stuff. So that's why I've been entertained during 2020. I'm still hoping that I'll keep up an international trip every year. So by the end of 2021, I'm hoping to be back adventure traveling. Again, 2020 was the first year that I went without a new UN country. I've been to 101, and I achieved that, my 101st country of Egypt, in 2019. 2020, I flew into Turkey with the intention to either go through Iran and the stands or Eastern Europe. I only had the front flight planned because it was a free outward flight. But a series of fucked up events in 2020 caused every single option to slowly close. 2020 started with the killing of General Soleimani by the Americans. That made the Iran stands route less likely. Then, as we all know, the fucking P word, pandemic, came, and that closed off all of my options. So, in recalling back throughout the flight manifest, I actually somehow caught the last flight out of Istanbul, Turkey. That's what luck would have. But I'm actually really happy that I made it out, because in watching the flight manifest, they basically closed up international flights for months and months afterwards. So because I was lucky, I caught literally a bargain-based cheap flight out, a one-way that was sub 500. That's a steal, especially during the erratic, volatile, crazy pandemic travel time. That's a fun walk down memory lane. All of the progress that's brought us here. Part of why I've been okay just doing what I've been doing in 2020 is because I think I've always had this desire to dance, but I never really had the time to fit it in while I was doing all that other stuff. Part of what makes my life exciting is that I'm interested and able to do many different things, The only thing I need is new, exciting, creative adventure. Anything that fits into those categories is fun to me. Would I have probably traveled if I could have in 2020? Yes. But now that I've invested all this time into dance, that's something I'm definitely going to bring across the world. What did I do? Did I even double check to make sure? Yes, there we go. Okay. Yes. Okay. So I'm going to start with my first pass. Okay, it was a little bit rough, I think. That's probably what's going to happen on days where I change choreography right up until the last moment before I perform. That's because although the choreographing process is largely creative, the dance and execution process is largely muscle memory. So if I keep changing things before, all of the practice that I've done up to that point might be useful for the moves that were already solid and finalized, but because there are new moves, anything before and after that also sometimes shifts because of timing, body placement, etc. So that's what it is. It is what it is. That's why I've been doing my new choreographies 3 times, because my hope is that each move will look good at least once during the 3 passes. Another aspect of creativity, aside from the dancing itself, is the costuming. I've mentioned before that I used to be a fashionista when I was younger. So I do have a wardrobe full of clothing, like a girly girl, but the good thing is that I've always been very fiscally responsible and financially responsible. So everything in my wardrobe is very, very, very cheap, even though I have a lot of brand names. The good thing too is that I was in what I call a very opportunistic stage even as a fashionista, so I would only buy things that were on sale, and situations would just come up where I would use those things. So I also previously mentioned my ex-engineer slash finance career, and I had a lot of range to pick from. So I have everything from casual to feminine to female Wall Street executive. I'm actually serious. I do have what I call a whole range of power suits. And part of why I could get those power suits so cheap is that I'm a relatively small person. I'm a small person. So while they do have suits for someone as small as me, they have very few, and those usually get thrown in the odds and ends of the specials bin. What usually ends up in odds and ends is things very small that fit me and things very large. So I've always been lucky in finding cheap clothing. I know some other people have had different experiences. For example, I have a relatively thin and tall friend who's had trouble finding his proportions in clothing, especially professional clothing, but I've had the complete opposite. I've been able to find a lot of cheap stuff, again, ranging from casual all the way to professional. For example, I think pretty much every single thing in my wardrobe costs less than 20 if it's top or bottom. Mostly less than 10 if it's top, unless it's a blazer. So that means every single well-fitting branded blazer has been $20 or under. Every single pair of pants has been $20 or under. So it's just been absolutely insane. Part of the reason why I only wear those types of things now is because I have everything that I could possibly need to last me a lifetime. And I also wear things out to the maximum because, unfortunately, most of clothing that's at its end of life will go into a landfill. So you either throw it into a landfill when it's lost its fashionability, or you throw it into the landfill after it's lost its fashionability and its functionality. So I use it to the very end of its function because I think if it's going to go into the landfill, it should go in as raggy, old, dirty, torn tatters. Basically, no one should be able to find any use for that piece of clothing once I'm done with it. And that to me is my environmentalist manifesto. I feel good doing that. And I actually have a lot of people in my life who donate things to me. They basically get rid of all of their clothing that's maybe even too worn for the bargain bins and the Big Brothers and other such clothing donations. So I take stuff that they feel bad giving to a Big Brother or other such donation bin. So that's fine though for me because most of the time, to be honest, most clothes that people give me are at most gently used. So I'm surprised, but if they're gonna give it to me, I'm gonna use it to complete tatters, and that's how I feel about it. I think most people donate to me because they know that that's what I'm doing. And that's important because, honestly, I've mentioned before that I'm peace outing, but I still care about the things I care about because I care about them. I've tried to tone down my environmentalism, but it is what it is. I just am who I am. I think I've largely kept my environmentalism functional. Some would argue I'm still too overboard, but I think I'm good. That's what I think, at least. So, are we gonna dance again? Yes, I'm gonna dance again. this week was also a difficult week to finalize my music because I watched The Weeknd on the Super Bowl, and this song, I feel like, embedded itself in my mind. Then, as I was just watching different choreographies to different songs to help me with my creative process, I came across some fire Ariana Grande songs. I mentioned her last week. She's fucking awesome. Seriously. For whatever reason, her songs just also get embedded into my head. But it's tough because when you've already started a choreography to another song, the progress I made was too much for me to try to do another song. That's the thing. I think that choreographing does take a lot of time, and if you've already started, the amount that I had done by the time the Ariana Grande songs came around was about 50%. So that's too much to start again. But maybe next time it'll be her, or if some other song comes and intercepts, I'll do that. Maybe though, I will call back to a pattern. The beginning of the year, the first song in the Gregorian New Year I did was to a Canadian duo, Justin Bieber and Shawn Mendes, Monster. This is my first choreography in the Lunar New Year, so I'm doing it to another Canadian, The Weeknd. Should I go for Drake as well? I've done what I've done. I think I'm good enough right now. And should I do my last pass while I'm ready? Yeah, okay, I'll do my last pass right now and then finish off. Okay. I've done my 3 passes, so I'll talk a little bit before I end off this week. And I watched The Weeknd on the Super Bowl, and I'm wondering how he possibly spent $7 million out of pocket for what his performance was. Okay, I mean, it was an interesting concept, but I think the $7 million could have been better spent. What I mean is, he did have some sort of concept, but I never could really tell what it was. Maybe you have to follow his threads from before. I read an article about it, and apparently the zombies dancing are somehow indicating how Hollywood has a self-esteem problem, so they correct themselves with plastic surgery and every other correction method they can think of, and his dance and zombie performance was some sort of questioning of that Hollywood mentality? Okay. Here's the thing, though. I think some of these people, i.e. The Weeknd, are rich enough to throw all of those standards out the window if they really want to. So, just stop. I mean, you can still be creative. What I mean is, just stop worrying about all that other bullshit. Okay, let's say at worst case, I look like the way I look. Would I ever be famous? Okay, unless weird, unique, creative suddenly becomes famous. I mean, obviously there are plenty of weird, unique, creative people out there in fame land, Hollywood, but they look much more polished than I do. They spend a lot more time on their image than I do. In fact, my brand, if it will, is complete opposite of them. I've no brand. In other words, I tread on authenticity. That's all I do. So, I think to me, maybe because I'm so confident and secure in myself, I know that people in Hollywood celebrity land often have this problem, this complaint about how Hollywood is so fake, is shallow and superficial. But here's the thing. Those people that call it out are also the same people that in theory have the resources to change things from the inside. So, okay, one thing is to comment on it, which is what I do, I comment. Another thing that you can do, especially if you have the resources, is actually change. You can affect change. Here's where I've been having an internal battle. I just want to enjoy myself. Why do I want to affect change on a world where I'll have no tendrils or ties after my generation? I really don't fucking care. And I can have this liberty because I've decided against being a parent. Now, if you are going to be a parent, you might have to ensure that this world goes on and on for blah 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 in your bloodline. Okay, that's the casino gamble house you've taken. I decided against that so I can just do whatever I want, enjoy, and peace out. That's why I'm less of an activist and I'm more of just enjoy yourself. Of course, we might get to the point where I, along with everyone else in the world, am so inside a box, inside such a tiny box that I find difficulty in being creative in that tiny, tiny, tiny box that I've been left in. But then here's where all of the mental work and the philosophical work should come to play. Sam Harris, the neuroscientist and philosopher, and prominent atheist, had a proposition. He thinks that he could actually be happy in solitary confinement. He could find a way. Does he want to be in solitary confinement? No. But part of all of the mental work that he's done for himself has been to prepare himself to be that kind of person. I think I'm in a similar position. And what does that mean? That's a good question. What does it mean to be in that position? Okay, I'm gonna give myself a little bit to think, do I have a philosophical tangent to go on about that? Or am I gonna leave it? I think I'll have to leave it because my brain has suddenly punked out. So at first I thought I was gonna go long because I had something to build on what Sam Harris proposes about solitary confinement, but I've lost it. So here's my prompt to myself for when I'm editing and rewatching. I mean rewatching. When do I ever edit? Think,